And Carmen, just a quick note. I was going to ask about that. Okay, we're recording.
We are. Welcome, everyone. It's day 3 of the APSIA Diversity Forum. Woohoo! I am so glad to see all of you again. It's Carmen Yetzi-Mazera, the Executive Director of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. We're so glad you could come out for this whole week, especially today's session on the myths and realities of applying for graduate school. I, as always, want to thank my amazing team at APSIA, Melina Perez and Brianna Suarez, for their very hard work on all of the programming that we do to support our members and to support all of you in this journey. I absolutely want to thank all of the sponsors and investors who make this possible, particularly the University of Washington Jackson School, University of Southern California Master of Public Diplomacy Program, Texas A&M Bush School, Syracuse Maxwell School, Princeton School of Public and International Affairs, the Open Society Foundations, McLarty Associates, Johns Hopkins SAIS, and the Harvard Kennedy School. There are 3 links in particular that I want to draw your attention to that I'll ask my colleague Brianna to put in the chat. One is the program for this whole week. I know many of you have seen it, but it's got our speakers' bios, the agenda, some more information on the folks that I just mentioned, and lots of other great details. So that's one. Number 2 is an invitation to our graduate school fair tomorrow. We'll have more than 25 amazing schools from Asia, North America, and Europe all online, here to talk to you, to answer those great personal questions that you might have. And maybe you'll discover a program that you've never heard of before, but is absolutely a great fit for you and for your goals and interests. And the third link that I wanted to point out to you is the APSIA YouTube page, where we have so many great resources and bits of content, including our video shorts on applying to graduate school, some longer sessions with some best practices in applying, but also all of the recordings from this week in case you weren't able to join us for a particular session, or if you'd like to revisit some of the great content and conversations we've already had. As always, if you need particular accommodation, feel free to reach out to us through the direct message or through our email or any other channel that you'd like. Carrier pigeon, I've been contacted by stranger methods. And so with that, I'm going to stop talking and turn the floor over to Professor Tony Lucero from the University of Washington Jackson School. Tony, please.
Thank you, Carmen, and good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. I'm coming to you from Coast Salish territories here in Seattle. And as Carmen said, I teach at the University of Washington. I have faculty appointments in the Jackson School of International Studies and also the Comparative History of Ideas department. This has been, it's really lovely to be here with you all, and especially with Allyson Hill and Ariel Matos, who I will briefly introduce in just a second. But just to give you a sense of what we want to try to do today, we're in the business of myth busting today. So we really want you to bring any kinds of questions, any kind of nagging insecurity. What's a worry that you have that we want to address? And we really want your conversation, your curiosity to drive this session. So please do not be shy about putting that in the chat box, and I will look for it. Also, if you are comfortable, would love to see your faces. You know, you're of course not required to turn on your camera, but I'm teaching this term. I'm on hour 4 of Zoom, so I have become a Zoom. I don't know, maybe I'm just a Zoom immune. I'm fine with Zoom right now. So I encourage you to come on. Maybe I'll tell you more likely to get accepted into these programs if you turn on your camera right now. No, I'm just kidding. It doesn't affect you at all, but would love to see you. So you have their full bios in your program. So I won't read all of their impressive background achievements, but I do want to briefly introduce my colleagues on the panel. Allyson Hill is the Associate Dean of Admissions at the University of Southern California's Annenberg School for Communication and Journalism, where she has been since 2001. She also has a host of experience from other institutions, including the Ohio State University and Denison University and SMU and Pomona. So she knows a lot about higher education and has a wealth of experience. Similarly, Ariel Matos, who is Associate Director of Graduate Admissions at Princeton University School of Public and International Affairs, also has a tremendous amount of experience in higher education, college admissions, financial aid, which is always on our minds, and federal TRIO programs. He has special experience in working with underrepresented communities and working in mentorship networks and student engagement. So all this to say is that we are all really very excited about meeting you here on this platform and really excited about your questions. As you gather them, I would like to just put an initial myth out there for Allyson and Ariel to deal with and demystify a little bit. So let's just get started with one of the myths that we have here on our sheet. A myth is that graduate school is only for privileged people. So can we start with that, Allyson? Is it all right if I start with you and then go to Ariel?
Sure. Well, that certainly is a myth. First of all, welcome. So glad you're here, and I'm glad to be here with you. It certainly is a myth that you have to be from a particular class or background in order to go to graduate school. Just like undergraduate colleges and universities seek a diverse student body from different ethnic groups, from different socioeconomic backgrounds, from different majors, and from different parts of the world. Just having a grad program of one type of student is not what any of our schools are looking for. So that is a huge myth, because the reality is there's a range of experience and background and diversity of not only the students who go to graduate school, but even of the faculty who teach in graduate school programs. So Ariel, would you like to add some more to that?
Sure, Allyson, thank you for leading off with that. I just wanted to follow, just to continue on with that point. Diversity is very well valued and respected and appreciated within graduate school classrooms. We feel that having students from different racial and ethnic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, religious backgrounds, gender background, like diversity is something that really strengthens the learning experience for all of our students at the Princeton School and across APSIA institutions. Is something that we really look for in terms of creating a diverse class, because we feel that as we are preparing future professionals, we want to make sure that voices from all around that everyone has an equal opportunity to sit at the table, right? We feel that there is value in those diverse voices at the table. So no, you don't have to come from a privileged background. There is value in your experience. There is value in your lived experiences and all of the things that you bring along with you. So never forget that, right? Just know that in all of the things that make you who it is that you are, there is value there. So don't think that you are ahead of myself, but just don't think that you have to come from a community, have to have a certain GPA in order to gain admission into graduate school. There are different schools for everyone, right? Different strokes for different folks. Right? It's up to you as a student to find a school that is most apt and suitable for you.
Thank you both for that. Just to continue the conversation just a little bit, like all myths, there's always a little kernel of truth somewhere that kind of give birth to these kinds of ideas. And I think the kernel of truth is that some folks really are more familiar with admissions processes, are more familiar with application processes, have the cultural capital, the social capital to kind of, some folks, who are not coming from first generation, college backgrounds, for example, do have a certain advantage in some ways because they're more familiar with these processes, right? So I'm wondering maybe if you could speak to that a little bit, Ariel and Allyson, and I would just interject that my one piece of advice is as you go through this journey, do not do it alone. You have mentors, you have connections, you have peers. Those resources are important for you to draw on because there are certain rules, there are certain best practices, and those can be learned. And I just want to kind of interject that. So I don't know, Ariel or Allyson, would you like to add a little bit to that?
Ariel, go ahead.
Sure, thank you. Tony, thank you for the myth. Full disclosure, I'm a first generation college. I was a first generation low income college student. My parents relied on governmental assistance when we were growing up. There were 6 kids in my household growing up, and not all of us graduated from high school. The reality is that 2 out of 6 of us did not graduate from high school, and a third actually dropped out and went back to high school. So for me and for the rest of my siblings who went off to college, it was a very uncertain process. There were times where we had a lot of questions that we couldn't ask our parents for help. I remember filling out, trying to fill out the FAFSA for the first time was like an 18-year-old trying to do taxes on their own, right? It was such a complicated process. But as Tony mentioned, don't do this alone. I feel like there is enough grace in the world that if you're looking for something, there will at least be one person who is willing to help you. Identify who those people are. Start the process of networking, of developing really your group of people who are going to help you along the way, because there will always be someone, right? Be comfortable asking for help. Be comfortable getting the help when you need, and just know that there are a lot of support services available as long as you feel comfortable enough to ask for them. So that's one of the big challenges, like me coming from a Latino background and also being male. When I was in college, there was a lot of stigma around asking for help. I felt like there was something wrong if I asked for help. And I feel like I struggled as a result of that. And it wasn't until I came to a point where I felt more comfortable and realized that if I don't ask for help, I'm going to continue to struggle. It wasn't until I came to that point that I was really able to start excelling and really displaying who it is and all it is that I brought to the table within the academic settings, right? So don't be afraid to ask for help. Develop a community of supporters who are going to help you along the way. And I think you'll be okay. Allyson?
Sure. Certainly, you may very well be first generation in this process right now, but you are actually a college student, or you've graduated college and you're a young professional. So you have resources available to you. And one of the reasons why I have enjoyed the admissions profession is that there are so many people who are so directed to wanting to help you, and they're available. And the information is available on our websites. And I know I can speak for myself. Even if you're not particularly interested in my program, I advise and talk to students all the time about their interests and can direct them to programs that could perhaps be of greater benefit to them, or better yet, encourage them to do the research that they need on their own. So you will find allies who look like you, who don't look like you, who have amazing experience, who don't have amazing experience, who would be willing to help you. And again, your presence in this program says that you are looking and curious and make yourself available to learn things that can help you in your further education. So take advantage of that.
Thank you both for those great observations. I want to just go through one other question that we have from our pre-prepared well of questions here, and then give folks a chance to put more questions in the chat. But one thing that's always on people's minds is finances. So one myth that's important is that you have to either fork out a lot of money or go into tremendous debt to go to graduate school. So Allyson, would you mind starting off helping us dispel that myth?
Well, this is always a really tough one with my colleague on this particular call, because his school is very unique among the APSIA schools. But I'll just say in general, graduate education is often viewed as an investment in yourself, in your own future. And schools offer a various range of opportunities to help you finance your master's degree education. This is another one of those areas where early research can really pay off for you, not only in finding programs that perhaps don't charge you tuition and fees, to finding external scholarships, to be considered for internal scholarships, and to just make it really a possibility for you to attend graduate school. So on one hand, if you don't look and you don't seek and you don't find, you will probably go into debt for your graduate education. On the other hand, which is the extreme, is should you look and find institutions like my colleagues, or find institutions like mine that offer merit scholarships for students to defray the cost of tuition, to defray the cost of graduate education, you are not going to go into tremendous debt. So it's true that some people do find themselves paying the full ride for their graduate education, but many students find resources either offered through schools or external scholarship or programs that offer an opportunity for them to get the graduate education they seek without paying the total cost. So my colleague will talk about his school, and ideas, other ideas about financing graduate education?
So I'm very happy to jump in at this point. At the Princeton School of Public and International Affairs, as well as across most of Princeton's graduate programs, we fully fund every admitted student. So all of your tuition will be fully covered. The cost of your health insurance, educational expenses will all be fully covered as part of your admission package into the school, regardless of wherever it is that you may come from, regardless if you're a domestic student or an international student. At the Princeton School, we will fully fund your cost of education. You may also qualify for a very generous living stipend. At the Princeton School, we are very proud to report that our students are really able to focus and hone in on their academics without having to work 1 or 2 part-time jobs in order to help supplement the cost of their college education, right? It's really one of the ways in which we invest in our community, in our students, and one of the ways in which we show our commitment towards public service as we aspire to create public servants, right? So and I understand that not everyone is going to get into a school like Princeton University, but I wanted to mention that there are, as Allyson mentioned, there are other graduate programs that do offer merit scholarship opportunities for students to apply into. But I would like to reiterate what Allyson mentioned. It's going to be incumbent upon you to do the research. Research the cost of graduate school at respective institutions, research what type of scholarships or fellowships they may offer that will help to offset the cost of graduate education there, right? Apply, reach out to the admissions team early on to see what else is available. One of the things that I learned during my own graduate journey is that lots of schools offer what is called graduate assistantships, where that is you may work for a particular department on campus, and as part of your work, your compensation is that they will pay for your graduate education and sometimes also your housing, right? So that's something that I didn't know when I was applying into graduate school, but it's something that I learned thereafter. And I committed to myself that I would certainly let other students know that these graduate assistantship opportunities are available. As students, if you're interested in public service, or if you're interested in working for the State Department, for example, there are fellowship programs such as the Pickering and the Wrangell, and also the Payne Fellowship programs, which will fully pay for your graduate education, and they are direct pathways into the State Department. Some schools will have part-time programs, which will help to alleviate the cost of being a student there. And also, when I was in undergrad, I was part of a federal TRIO program called the Educational Opportunity Fund program, because I was low income and a first-generation college student. The financial benefits of being a part of this program as an undergraduate student certainly transferred with me when I started graduate school, as they didn't pay for my entire cost of graduate education, but they certainly helped to supplement the cost of books and a few additional $1,000 off my overall cost of tuition, right? So if you are part of any of those programs, just ask, right? Start becoming more comfortable asking those questions, right? If you're a part of a program, if you can have a conversation with your academic advisor, with the financial aid team there at your school, just mention your interest in going on into graduate school and start asking those questions as to what financial options are available to help offset the cost of that graduate education.
Thanks. I really agree with everything you all said. And I just want to maybe underline one thing that Allyson gestured to, that graduate education is indeed an investment. And I think there are at least 2 ways of thinking about the finances of graduate education. One is, if you're lucky enough to be at a place like Princeton where you get your costs covered, that's fantastic. You should absolutely pursue that in the Wrangell and Pickering, all of the fellowships. People should absolutely look for that. Free money is a beautiful thing. You should take it. But the second thing is, think about the placement of graduate students in professional careers. Some places have excellent track records in placing their graduate students. If you get a sense of that, that's a good question to ask these programs. That way you're more secure that even if you have to take out a loan, you'll know that down the line you have a pretty good probability of getting to the professional place you want to be. So there are at least 2 different ways of thinking about that kind of financial question. So I just wanted to add on to the great things that Ariel and Allyson already said. Okay, we've got a few really interesting questions in the chat box. So let's dive in here. Billy Noy has a really interesting question about a perception about the way Americans are often seen to be as white, which I want to expand that question just a little bit, because I think as folks are considering working in international affairs, there is this also assumption that it's a certain kind of person, right? So I'm wondering, Ariel or Allyson, if you'd like to reflect on that kind of idea about, the perception of what people should look like as they come into this line of work, this kind of realm.
Ariel?
Allyson, I was going to hand it over to you.
Okay, I'm happy to take it. I think historically, the field was really one, and I'm talking the field of international affairs, international development, public diplomacy, that it was very much an area that people who were from certain background, certain ethnic group tended to be representatives of a country, of our nation, America. And so, if you're using an old lens to look at the career, yes, that is what you would have seen. But let's look at the United Nations as an example of the diversity of nations and who they send and who is representing them. And look at the current diversity of our own diplomatic corps and people who are interested in international affairs. There is greater diversity because of programs like the one you're participating in and others, and fellowship programs that really are intentional of reaching out to potential students who may not even know about the field, but may have the natural skill set to do the kinds of things that make a diplomat successful. So again, like with all myths, there is a measure of truth in there, but the reality is something that's very different. And for my colleague and I, representing the institutions that we do, as he mentioned earlier, the diversity of students in these programs, because of our institutional commitment to having diverse voices and all voices trained, educated, and able to represent in all of these different fields, are absolutely critical. And it's not brand new. This didn't just happen yesterday. These are things that have been a part of our APSIA and our organizations for decades, and that is making a difference in what that complexion or composition of that diplomatic corps appears to be. Ariel?
Right, and if I could just add that I believe globally there is a very specific push to embrace diversity everywhere. Some places are further along in that process than others. However, there is a push globally to do that, to really value and highlight the benefits of having a diverse workforce or having a diverse academic institution, right? These are all things these are conversations that are being had presently. We know that a lot of those conversations were certainly amplified with a lot of the racial and social unrest that was happening within the country last year and continue to this day, right? So what I would encourage students even in thinking about the prototypical profile of a graduate student, right? So when I was a student in undergrad a few years ago, I didn't think that people like me went to graduate school. I didn't think that we were good enough to get in, right? And it wasn't until I was able to sort of peek my head in the door that I started to realize that my voice, my opinions, my ideas were valued. They were needed at the table. So having that understanding, it's even if you feel that others are going to have a certain perspective, a certain perception or a particular stereotype about who it is or where you come from, right? The only thing that we can do as individuals is to change that, right? We have to be able to show up and we have to be our authentic selves and prove to them who it is that we are, the abilities and the talents that we bring to the table, and ultimately help change perspectives through our own experiences. Right? That's the only way that we're going to be able to sort of change some of those stereotypes or some of the perspectives that are out there that may not include us. We have to find a way to include ourselves, and just know that there are institutions and organizations that are looking for us to do just that.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for that. For folks who are monitoring the chat, there is some useful information there about other resources for looking for scholarships. APSIA has a nice directory of fellowships that you should take a look at. There are some really wonderful questions in the chat. I'm gonna bundle two for our panelists to take on at the same time. One of them is about the GREs, and BNEOA asks, even if a school says GREs are optional, you should still submit scores. Is this true? What considerations should be aware if you don't submit GRE scores when they are made optional? That's question one. The second question is about, is it possible for students to take 1 or 2 courses in a graduate school, then transfer to another, should the student find new interests? So one, a question about GRE, and two, a question about transferring from one program to another, how recommendable or advisable that might be. Ariel, can we start with you?
Sure, I'm happy to answer the first. Allyson, can you answer the second?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So in terms of GREs being optional, that is not a trick question. If the school is stating that the GREs are optional, then it's not necessary for you to submit those GRE scores. Now, optional is very different from not required. Those are two separate. Some schools will have the optional option, or others will have the not required option. Not required, I believe, means that they're unwilling to accept the GRE scores, where optional means that you can. Now, what I would tell you that it's important when for you as an applicant, it's important for you to understand what the school is looking for. All right, so at the Princeton School, the GREs are still required for the MPA. But the reason why they're required is because our curriculum is very quantitative in nature. You're going to come across a lot of microeconomics, some statistics, some econometrics. So for us, we as an admissions committee, when we're reviewing your application for admission, we want to feel the confidence that you have an understanding of quantitative coursework. We want to be able to make sure that you're going to be able to do the work. Right? So that's the reason why we still require the GRE, because we look at that quantitative section on the GRE. And if you don't have a particularly strong GRE score, it's okay, but we want to see some sort of quantitative engagement throughout your undergraduate transcript. Right? So what we tell students is you can show us in your undergraduate transcript, or you can show us through the GRE scores, or you can do both. But ultimately, our committee wants to have confidence that you have the ability to do that type of work. Right? So let's say that you're applying to a different school where they have a GRE optional course. If you understand that their curriculum has a lot of, it's very math-based in nature, right? And you didn't take any math-based courses in undergrad, you're going to want to try to find another way to show evidence that you can do the work, right? So it may be optional, but because you may not have taken that requisite coursework in undergrad, you need to have another evidence point that you can ultimately do the work, right? So for you as a student, do the research on what that school is ultimately looking for. If you don't have what they're looking for in your undergraduate transcript, maybe you can help to supplement that through the GRE. But if a school doesn't require the GRE, you won't be penalized for not submitting a GRE score. Again, just use it as an additional data point that can help to strengthen your overall application.
Let me just inject one more quick thing before Allyson comes in. At the University of Washington, we have several Title VI centers, area study centers that administer what are known as foreign language and area studies fellowships, which can often pay for your tuition at graduate school. Those do still require GREs. So sometimes you may not need a GRE score for admission, but there may be other fellowships that still do require GRE. So just a note to do your homework to see kind of what are the requirements for different opportunities. Allyson?
That's terrific. I'm going to go straight ahead to the question about transferring. Please know that in the graduate school world, the term transfer, as it is found in undergraduate, doesn't really exist. You simply apply to a graduate degree program, and should you decide that that program's not right for you, you apply to another graduate degree program and you withdraw from one and accept the offer to go to the other. Universities individually set rules about how graduate coursework taken elsewhere will be treated in a current program. So there's no blanket understanding of how coursework completed someplace else is going to be treated at a new institution. And I think we're one theme that you're going to get from this session is do your research and find out what that school is going to require or how they plan to treat coursework from one institution to another. So again, the important point, the term transfer between graduate degree programs doesn't exist as a concept. You apply to one, you enroll. If you're not going to stay, you withdraw, and you would have applied and been admitted to another program where you start over with their course requirements, with an understanding that some coursework may be reviewed and accepted toward degree requirements, but it may not be. And the university dictates how that coursework would be treated.
And just to jump in really quickly, hearing Allyson talking about how the receiving school, right, the school that into which you transfer may or may not accept all of the credits that you may have accrued at that original institution. Wearing my financial aid hat, that just it gives me anxiety to think about that, right? Because whatever financial aid package you may have received at that original institution may not transfer with you. If the institution gave you a specific scholarship, that scholarship may not transfer with you, right? So when we're thinking about transferring, in graduate school is typically, if you're going for a traditional master's, it's only 2 years. There isn't a whole lot of time there, right? So you need to be mindful of that financial investment that you're making, especially if you are thinking about transferring to another institution, which is why it's so critical to do that research into that school before you ultimately submit that application and decide if you're going to matriculate there for your graduate studies. And Tony, can I just interject with the myth that I often hear?
Sure.
So one of the myths that I often hear in my college admissions journeys is that you need to have a perfect 4.0 GPA and GRE scores to gain admission into graduate school. That is not necessarily true. It's just not necessarily, it's not true, right? There are students who come with a diverse amount of academic backgrounds. Some come from a community college into a four-year school and then into graduate school. Some come directly from a graduate school. Some will come from an IB, right? There is a great diversity of applicants out there, right? When you're looking at graduate schools, you really want to make sure that that school is going to have, it's going to align with whatever it is that your professional interests are going to be, right? So, and then you also need to look at what the school is looking to bring into their classes. At the Princeton School, you know, we understand that there might be a mystique or prestige about applying to Princeton. A lot of students feel they have to be perfect students in undergrad and come from a specific background to gain admission into Princeton. That's not necessarily true. We have some students who have been admitted with a 4.0 and a 3.9. We also have some students who have been admitted with a 3.5, but have a very strong commitment to public service, right? So it's important for you to better understand what the schools are looking for and to try to find a way to supplement that. As first-gen low-income students, we understand that that pathway towards a 4.0 it's not always very clear. So it's okay. You don't need to have that perfect GPA or the perfect GRE scores to get in. Really what a lot of schools are looking for is your ability to learn what they have to teach. They're looking for you to align with whatever it is those institutional or educational goals and aspirations are for that respective institution. And they also want to make sure that you have you have the tenacity, you have the grit, you have the resolve to make it through a very tough and rigorous academic curriculum, right? So if you can show that through your entire application, right? And many of us will have what is considered a holistic application review process, right? I think you'll be okay. But don't deny yourself the opportunity to apply to a school because you may not have that 4.0 or the perfect GRE score, right? Because again, many of our scores aren't exactly looking for.
Thank you, Ariel. And in full disclosure, I actually went to grad school at Princeton and I did not have a 4.0 or a perfect GRE. So at least one data point indicates that Ariel is absolutely correct. There's a similar question in the chat about what kinds of qualifications you need to come in. Angel Ornelas asks about work experience. Angel writes, for APSIA schools, extensive work experience is highly encouraged. I was wondering if there's a particular number of years / specific experiences that admission committees are looking for in applicants. Allyson, you want to start us off with this question?
Yeah, schools that require work experience are usually very explicit, either in their application guidelines, on their website, or in their class profile, showing what kind of work experience that admitted students actually have. And so again, it's all about your research. What does the school that you're looking for recommend in terms of your background? And among our APSIA schools, a good number of them are looking for some experience. It could be as little as 2 to 4 years. It could be mid-career for some of the more professional programs that are directed to people who have considerable public diplomacy or international relations experience. But there are other schools like USC's program in public diplomacy that do not require previous work experience. So a student can come directly from their undergraduate education or directly from a job that may or may not be related to diplomacy or international relations, international affairs, and find a place in our degree program because of their passion for the field, their desire to work in the field, and presenting a strong application that will, convince the faculty that they're ready and fit for studies in public diplomacy. So it really depends. And again, it's not a secret. Schools will tell you upfront what they're looking for in terms of the application process. And if you have work experience, then those schools that require it and want to see it will find your application attractive. And those that don't require it may still find your application attractive, but it varies.
And so for our school at the Princeton School, we really do value work experience. Most admitted students will have between 2 and 5 years of work experience. We have a very, very, very small contingency of students who are admitted without any full-time work experience after having earned their bachelor's degrees, but they have an additional sort of hook, right? Something that ties them back into our program and also into the professional workforce once they graduate after earning their master's degree. And those students, again, are students who have been awarded the Pickering or the Rangel Fellowships or the Truman Fellowships, because the way that the partnership works is at the conclusion of the graduate program, they're guaranteed career opportunities directly within the State Department. So it's like when you receive the Pickering or the Rangel, you have to go to graduate school right away or you risk losing it. Right? So typically, these are the only students that we will admit into Princeton without having some level of work experience after having earned their bachelor's degree. And another thing that I really want to talk about quickly is that students will often say, well, I worked throughout my entire undergraduate career. Like I worked 2 part-time jobs, or I worked 3 part-time jobs, or, I interned at an organization, or that's the level of work that I've accrued. And I've done that for at least 4 years at this point. Does that not count? So it certainly counts to paint a clearer picture of who it is that you are, right? And your resolve and your grit. But for the Princeton School, we really want to see how it is that you put your undergraduate degree to work, right? We feel like that time after you earn your bachelor's degree will really help to shape your policy interests, will help to shape who it is that you're going to become, and will help to mature you just a little bit in anticipation for graduate school, right? So we really encourage our students to try to get at least a few years of work experience before they come back and apply for the MPA at the Princeton School. Other schools may be different, but I can only speak about my school.
Yeah, if I could just chime in advice that I give my own students, my own undergrads, when they're thinking about this, I often tell them not to be in a rush to get to graduate school. The graduate school will be there, and there are a couple of reasons not to hurry. One is because you really do need some specificity in terms of what you want to do and where you want to do it, and that takes some time. So take a little bit of time to do that research, because doing that on top of a full course load and in addition to workload, that can be a lot. So taking some time can be helpful. And secondly, having some different kind of experience is always just helpful for you as a human being, just to do something that's a little bit different, explore other opportunities. Even if you can't get that dream internship you're thinking about, you can find other volunteer opportunities that can make you a more compelling candidate. So for those reasons, you may not want to rush. But we have other great questions that I do want to get to. One is from the Lise, who, if I can draw from her question, she's asking about feeling overwhelmed. It feels overwhelming just a little to pick a program in graduate school since there are so many. What questions should we ask ourselves to help make that decision? That's a big question there, Allyson. Do you want to take the first stab at it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of questions to ask, and it leads to another myth, which is you have to go to, while you're in graduate school, you can figure out what it is you want to do, which that's a myth, because the graduate school is a very expensive place to go. Even if you have a full tuition scholarship, the expense of time away from work, investment of your energy, and something you're not sure you want to study. So however it takes for you to determine your passion, what you're most interested in, what it is you really want to do, how you want to make a difference in the world or in your own life, you need to take the time to do that. And, you know, everybody's on a different timeline for figuring that out. Some people figure that out in college. You know, they know their junior year, when I graduate, I'm going directly to grad school and I'm preparing for that. And other people have no idea, and that's perfectly fine. And graduate school isn't the place, of course, to go to figure that out, because graduate degree programs are very specific. Unlike your undergraduate program, there aren't a lot of electives, there aren't general education requirements that expose you to more things. It really is focused on a particular area in a particular field. So you're not going to get that leeway to figure out what it is you want to do in most graduate programs, because they're very specific. So the thing to do is, you know, I'm a big list person. I would start a list. What are the things I really enjoy doing? Who do I want to do them with? Where would I want to do that? As a real basic start. And if you don't know, that means you need more life experience. You may need to work. You may need to travel. You may need to just focus on what's before you until you really figure out, where do I need that specialized training so that I can do this thing that I'd like to do. Keep in mind that the primary purpose of a master's degree is to prepare for a profession. And that's why, you know, if you're not sure, it's not a good investment, because if you don't know where it is you want to go, you're not going to be able to take full advantage of what a graduate degree program is offering you. And of course, there's doctoral programs, which isn't really the focus of our presentation today. But if you have a research question, if you want to explore and create new knowledge, well, that's more of a doctoral track as opposed to a master's degree track, which is preparing you primarily for a profession. There's certainly academic master's degrees, but it really is a matter of getting more life experience and exposure, taking advantage of your faculty, asking them about their path, taking advantage of your career development office, getting support in terms of your exploration of possible things, but giving yourself permission and license to figure it out before you jump into something. Because, you know, often I don't feel like I work a day, because I'm doing what I love and I enjoy it, and it gives me great pleasure to make a difference in the lives of people who are pursuing higher education. And I figured that out a long time ago, when I knew I didn't want to be a classroom teacher. I knew I wanted to be in education, but I also knew I didn't want to be a classroom teacher. And it was through college that I decided and determined what my path really ought to be, in terms of career interests and focus and love and that sort of thing. And I think that's possible for everybody, but on your own timeline. Ariel?
So Allyson just dropped a whole lot of gems in your lap right now. So I hope that you all were taking notes. I completely will reiterate what it is that she just said. You know, Tony mentioned it as well. Don't feel a rush to get into graduate school. You know, really take some time to figure out what it is that you want to do, and specifically what it is that you want to do, not what other people expect of you. I remember when I started my undergraduate journey, my parents were like, listen, you know, as a Dominican male, my parents were like, listen, either you're going to become a lawyer or you're going to become a doctor, and that's it. Those are my only options. Right. And it didn't work out that way for me, but I've still found a way to be successful after some trial and error. Right. So you want to make sure that you can figure that out, what it is that you ultimately want to do, because graduate school, again, it's only 2 years. It's not like undergrad where you're taking a bunch of liberal arts courses to, you know, to sort of feel your way around and learn a lot of different disciplines. Graduate school is very specific. But to be very specific about the question that was asked, what are some questions that you can ask, like an admissions team, when you're doing your research for graduate school? You should ask, what is the institution's level of commitment towards diversity, equity, and inclusion amongst the student population, amongst the faculty ranks? Like, what will it, like, how is the institution reflecting their commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion? What Are some financial support services available for students? Now this is becoming a much more sort of a much safer space to talk about mental health. But I feel like for graduate students, it's important to talk about what health and mental health support services are available at that institution. You can ask, where are alumni presently working? What internship opportunities are available, right? When you're speaking with admissions teams, don't feel like you need to frame those questions perfectly. Don't feel like you need to research how to ask a specific question, right? We are real people, just like all of you. We all had our own journeys. Feel comfortable asking your question, however it is that you feel like asking the question, right? And depending on how they respond, that could be all the response that you need to know about that respective institution. Right? When I'm giving my presentations for Princeton, like I say, listen, I understand I work for Princeton University, but right now we're going to have a conversation, right? Like however it is that you need to ask your questions, feel free and feel comfortable to ask those questions. I'm here to have a conversation with you, right? You should feel like the same or a very similar sense of just comfort and welcoming when you're speaking with these different admissions professions. Because if you don't, and the admissions team is really the face for that institution, I think that really says a lot for you as a prospective student.
Allyson, could I invite you to reflect on similar sets of questions about what are the ways you can approach admissions folks, and what are some good questions to bring to them?
Sure. Well, again, I think I really fall in the camp of it really is about you as an individual coming to terms with you, because you can collect a whole lot of information from admissions, but if you don't know you, that's not going to be particularly helpful. And so one question could very well be, how well do I need to know my interests in order to be successful in this graduate degree program? What if I change my mind in pursuing this program? What opportunities are there for me? I think one of the questions that we had on our short list was, what about double degrees, getting a master's and getting an MBA, or getting a master's and getting a law degree? So asking the kinds of questions about what unique academic opportunities exist for graduate degree students in your program, again, could help you understand your own interests and how your school would be able to support you.
And if I can just discourage one question as a prospective student, I would ask you not to ask that institution, what is their admissions rate or what is their admit rate? That question will not help you in any way, right? So students will I promise you, during every presentation that I have about our school, someone will always ask, so what is the admit rate at Princeton? And the reality is, whether the admit rate was 75% or 2%, it doesn't make a difference because you still need to complete the application, right? And what we tell students is the only way that you can guarantee that you're not going to be admitted is if you don't apply, right? So that question can either tell you that, oh, if I apply, I have a strong chance of getting in, or it's going to tell you the chances of getting in are so minimal and you're going to intimidate yourself into not applying. Right. So I would try to take that question sort of out of your repertoire of questions for admissions counselors, because ultimately it's not there to serve you. Yeah, I would take that.
That's really interesting. When you said that, I thought you were going to ask my favorite question not to ask, which is, why should I come to your graduate degree program? And this, as an admissions officer who does not know you, except for the second that we said hi and we sat down for a conversation, I don't know why you should come to my degree program over another one. And what that question tells me is that you haven't done any research, that you don't know you and you don't know my institution. And I know my institution very well, but I don't know you. So the issue of fit and match is largely something that you can determine by knowing yourself and then researching the institution, so that you're asking those questions that Ariel and I raised that will help you know that that institution is actually a good fit for you, your skill set, what it is you want to do, and where you see yourself going in the future.
Terrific. We're winding down to our last few minutes, so I definitely want to encourage people to enter more questions if you feel the need. There is a question asking about any wisdom you all might have about online master's degrees programs. And I don't know if USC or Princeton offer any of these, but do you, Ariel, do you have any insight on that matter? Online MA programs?
So I have limited information about that. As you mentioned at the Princeton School, we don't offer any online fully online master's programs. We made a few adjustments over the last year because of the pandemic. Some students weren't able to come to campus, so we did have virtual programming at that point. But really what we pride ourselves on is the in-person interactions, classroom experience, and networking opportunities that you'll find at the Princeton School. So we don't have them available at the school. But for other students who may be interested, just based on my experience and understanding of higher education, some students really enjoy online programs because it allows them the flexibility to log in whenever they have a free moment. I'm the type of student, I need to be in a classroom. Like I need to be able to raise my hand, to have my question answered. I'm the type of student who, whenever the professor asks a question, I like to raise my hand first, even if I'm wrong. I just like that in-person interaction. Everyone is different. You really need to understand what works best for you. Yeah, that's all I have on that one.
Allyson?
The pandemic taught us all that we can learn and we can work and we can accomplish a lot of things online. And before the pandemic, even then, institutions were beginning to accept online education and online degrees as viable as an in-person residential experience, to the extent that online degree programs don't advertise on the transcript or on the degree diploma that it was an online program. So I think if nothing else, the last year and a half may actually see more online programs developed because faculty can teach a wider range of people across the world. The degree program that they offer would be available to more people. And so I think you'll see more of it. And I definitely believe that there will be less stigma or second side-eyed look at programs that are online because they will just become a part of the normal higher education process. We do not, at USC, University of Southern California, we do not offer our public diplomacy program online. Like Princeton, we did the pivot so that our students in our programs could complete their degree program online this past year and a half. We are expecting to be fully in person this fall. We actually started our summer session in another degree program, fully in person. And so again, as Ariel said, depending on your need, you can find online programs in almost every discipline. But if you're the kind of student who benefits from in-person and wants in-person, you will definitely be able to find that as well.
Wonderful. We have time for one last question, and I'm glad this one got entered in the chat, and that's about letters of recommendation. Do you all have advice or tips about choosing your recommenders for letters of recommendation? Allyson, you want to take this one first?
Sure. I think it's absolutely critical that you select faculty or employers who know you well and can speak to your fit for advanced education beyond your bachelor's degree. You don't need to prep your recommenders beyond providing them with your resume and sharing your interest and passion and ideas with them, because faculty know how to write these letters. And so you want someone who knows you well, who taught you perhaps in an upper division class as opposed to a class from your freshman or sophomore year, because our understanding is that you would have grown in college since you entered. And so someone who taught you in an upper division course in your major would certainly be a valuable person to write on your behalf. So, Ariel?
And if I could add anything onto that, is again, do the research on the graduate program that you're looking to apply into and see if there are any specific if there's any specific coursework that you will really take while you're there at that school, and try to find a professor during your undergraduate experience that really aligns with that type of coursework you're going to encounter at the graduate school level. Again, at the Princeton School for our MPA program, you're going to take a lot of quantitative courses. So it would be nice if you've taken a math professor in undergrad who can then write you a letter of recommendation, right? Because that will then give our committee the confidence that there is an academician who is familiar with the work and can sort of attest to your ability to successfully complete that work. You know, it's the same advice that I would give high school students. If you're looking to apply into a nursing program, try to have a biology or a math teacher write you a letter of recommendation. It's the same with graduate students, right? If you're thinking about a program that really centers on math, try to have an undergraduate professor who centered on math, who taught you math, who can then write you a letter of recommendation.
If I could add just one more piece of advice, speaking as a faculty member, I should tell you that faculty members are not to be trusted. We have so many demands on our time. You need to be squeaky wheels. You know, it's not enough to say, write me a letter of recommendation and then hope and pray that the faculty member remembers clearly who you are, remembers the paper you wrote. You need to invest some time into guiding that faculty member to write the strongest letter possible. An email or something that reminds a faculty member how you know them, what work you did, maybe attaching a paper you did, giving that faculty member the ease and you want this information at their fingertips, and the constant reminders, the gentle nudges, you know, deadlines coming up, you know, faculty, sometimes we need a little herding. So do not be shy about being a squeaky wheel. You are the agents of your own education and your professional advancement. So be attentive to that.
Excellent advice, Tony.
I'm just trying to keep it real. I think that will, that's about all the time we have. I speaking for myself, I would be happy to be available for folks who have questions through email. I know Allyson and Ariel have been very accessible in the past, so I would encourage you all, if you have other questions, to contact them. And let me also remind and repeat Carmen's invitation to come back tomorrow for the graduate school fair and have more opportunities to connect. Thanks, Carmen. Thanks all the facts of APSIA. And thanks, of course, to Allyson Hill and Ariel Matos. It's great to see you all again.
It was terrific. Thank you.
If I can
Thank you,
ask
folks.
everybody
Thank you so much.
to do our quick evaluation poll and let us know a little bit more about your thoughts on this great session we've just had. I think the advice on knowing yourself and learning more about programs is so wonderful. And the fair tomorrow, we keep plugging this, but it really is a low barrier to entry place for you to start to do that discernment and do that research. And we try to create lots of different tools to make it easy for you to ask yourself those questions or nudge your faculty in a nice way and all of those different pieces. So we're here to help you as well, in addition to all of my amazing admissions colleagues. So thanks to everybody for filling out the poll, and thanks to our speakers for being a part of this great conversation.